1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. My guest today is Paul Ossola. Paul is one of my favorite bass players and people, and he moved here to Nashville a few years ago from New York. And the fact that he was both a member of the Saturday Night Live band and Levon Helm's band immediately piqued my interest, because there's two of the best gigs you can ever get. And I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a minute too. So thank you for being my guest today, and welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me, Andreas. You know, I've never done this before, so I'm really interested and excited about it.
Well, I'm new to this too, and I'm just interested in exploring all of my friends' stories, because I'm privileged to actually know a lot about you and our fellow musician friends just by sharing stories off a microphone. And I thought, well, I'm always interested to hearing those stories, and some of them are really colorful or interesting or whatever, but I need to find a way to share those stories with a little bit of a wider audience. So that's what we're trying to do today. You grew up in Connecticut.
Yep.
So what are some of your earliest musical memories? What set you off on this path you're on?
Well, I played in a band, several bands. I started music in school, and then I guess I was playing before the Beatles hit. I was playing the upright bass in the orchestra in school, and then I just wanted to rock. So I got in a couple of different bands, and then eventually I got a bass guitar, and I was off. But that's where I started. I know that, like, so many of my friends, got excited by the Beatles, and certainly I was too. But I was in a band. I remember being in a band at a rehearsal, and we had heard about the Beatles, but then I heard "I Want to Hold Your Hand" on the radio, and we all, what is that? So
yeah,
that's why I'm here.
A lot of other musicians mention that as a really important point in their musical life. Especially the Ed Sullivan performance on February
Right,
9th,
yeah, seen him on
1964.
TV, but I heard him on the radio first. I mean, I remember seeing Elvis on TV. I was real little, and that I was real excited by that. I didn't know about the from the waist up business. I didn't know about any of that. I just knew that this was really cool. Whatever it was really different, and the fact that there was so much excitement about it, and so much excitement against it, whatever it was. When Elvis was on once, there was big deal about it, and I think that interested me more,
Yeah.
the rebel aspect. Yeah.
Do you remember what initially made you pick up an upright bass or a bass? Is that anything in particular why you
Well,
chose that?
in school I started on the trumpet, and then I changed to the baritone horn. Then I changed to the tuba. I don't know why I was attracted to the low notes, but I was. And then the head teacher of the orchestra needed a bass player. He was a bass player. And he took me aside one day and went on the big bass. Dum 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 dum. Did one of those, and I was standing there. I said, "Do you want to do that? Do you want to learn to do that?" Yeah, So he had a bass player. That was kind of how I nobody taught me how to play boogie woogie at that point, but I was holding the bass. Yeah.
Was Fancy the first real band you played in, or did you have a band before that?
Yeah, I had bands before that. We were the first ones that I made that made a record. But I had plenty of garage bands and different bands. We had in high school I was in a band called The Talisman. That was the first band I was in high school, and then when I went to college, got in a band, and then eventually more band. Eventually, Fancy became the first band that made a record.
Yeah, and Fancy then turned into the Scratch Band eventually.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And who are some of the people in that band? Because I know some of those people are still people you frequently collaborate with.
In which band?
The Scratch Band?
Scratch Band. That was, Christine Allman, the Beehive Queen, and G.E. Smith, and Mickey Curry, and Robert Orsi, and myself.
Yeah, and...
Now, there were many incarnations that had actually started from a different band without half of those people, but that became the Scratch Band, the main band that was together for the most time and got the biggest level of success.
And Mickey Curry obviously, became Bryan Adams' drummer and has been with him for all of Bryan Adams' career. G.E. Smith is one of the most, regarded guitar players. Christine Allman has made quite the name for herself as an artist, and as a sometime featured singer for the Saturday Night Live band too. So how was that? I mean, obviously all of you guys had the talent and the determination to wanting to turn this into a career, but it's pretty unique still that there's that much talent in a band from not a center city necessarily.
It's really is a unique situation because I'm still in contact with pretty much everyone in the band, with all those people, and a lot of us remember each other's birthday, and like most of the bands that I've been in since then and before, I don't know anybody's birthday. I might still be friendly with them, but we all know. I just know when I know when everybody's birthday is.
Yeah,
and don't necessarily even contact them on their birthday, but I acknowledge that they're a year older.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys, you reconnected or you had different intersections throughout your career, and we'll get to that in a minute. After that, though, you eventually moved to New York. Was that around the time you were in a band called the Yankees?
No. The Yankees was just like a studio recording band for me. We at one point, the manager of the Scratch Band formed this label called Big Sound Records, and it was around the time of the punk and new wave music going on, and so the Scratch Band was like one of the bands that recorded at the studio all the time, and anyhow, so the studio where our manager was centered. Anyhow, somehow they hooked up with John Tiven, and so that was really Tiven's band. Mickey and I just got called in to play on a bunch of things. They had other people playing too.
Yeah, but
Other drums and bass and other stuff.
one thing that piqued my interest, though, and you might not even remember that, but there's a song on that record called "Somebody Like You," where you and John have co-writer credit on it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You gotta trace those publishing
Yeah,
royalties somehow. Anyway, I just looked at the record cover and said, that's interesting because we never talked about writing together. But that was another project where you and Mickey Curry were on.
Mm-hmm.
And he obviously is world-renowned drummer now. But what playing with him, and I know you guys are still friends too, what was the dynamics of that rhythm section when you got to play with him?
Well, I remember this is weird. Christine's brother, Victor, whose name is Victor Steffens, had been in the band before Mickey, and at some point he left. He wanted to be producing and stuff, so he left, and we got Mickey, and we auditioned several people, and Mickey just stood, like miles above anybody that came around to play drums, and they were good drummers, but Mickey just had a thing that he was comfortable to be around and stuff, and that's a thing I have soon since discovered that as well as playing your instrument, everybody's got to be able to play their instrument, but in recording and in interacting with people, if you're fun to be around, that makes you let's get him in the room, because not only is he going to play the drums, but he's fun to be around, and Mickey was a good guy. He is a good guy. And as we go on, I'll tell you other people who are fun to have in the room. But anyway, we just got Mickey in the band, and it lifted the band. Went up a level or two right away.
Yeah. So through the 80s, you performed with different people, including John Eddy and Buster Poindexter, and you also did Broadway type of gigs.
Yeah.
What were some of the more memorable gigs through the 80s?
Well, the ones that you mentioned, John Eddy is he's a songwriter who lives in town here, although I haven't seen him. He's a really good songwriter, and I discovered he lived when he was from New Jersey, lived in New Jersey, and he was famous there. He had so many people came to see him. It was that was the first experience for me of being with somebody that girls went crazy for this guy. He never got to be really famous, but he was famous all along the Jersey Shore, and it was pretty incredible. I loved that. Playing. At that point I was already living in Manhattan, and playing with Buster too. It's really he is David Johansen, Buster Poindexter, and playing with those guys. I guess that was kind of the highest profile gig that I'd had up to that point.
And that was such a fun band with the horns and everything.
Yeah. And I was actually never in the band. I was a sub. They got me to sub once, and they liked me. And then Tony Garnier was the regular bass player, and he was playing with Dylan. So he was gone for long periods of time. But every New Year's Eve, when they had a gig, they called Tony. It was his job. Like I said, I played it a lot, and but it was his gig.
Yeah.
That Levon was the same thing, actually. I never was officially in the band, but Mike Merritt, who I was subbing for, once I had subbed it once, Levon liked me, the guys in the band liked me. It worked out good, so they kept me going, and it's a thing. Once they're comfortable with having a sub, then the guy you're subbing for is more comfortable to take the gig off. So both of those gigs, that is kind of how it evolved for me.
And we'll talk more about Levon here in a minute too. But by the end of the 80s, your friend G.E. Smith became a part of the Saturday Night Live band. And then eventually you got a call to do that gig. How did that come about? Was he your entrance into the Saturday Night Live band?
Oh yeah. Let me just back up a little bit. So GE was in our band, the Scratch Band, and like I was talking about, lifting the band a level. When he joined, was the same thing before Mickey. So he's had a really powerful effect on my life. I had always been a band guy. I'd always wanted to be in a band. I had never considered anything else in music, I wanted to be in a band. And then when GE left, and he just wanted to move to New York and be a guitar player. When he left and got some gigs as a sideman, it kind of, that opened up a whole new world to me. I never even thought of that. Then that's when I moved to New York after he and Mickey had gone. So GE leaving the band and becoming successful is sort of, I wanted to be like that, So where were we?
How did you get into the Saturday Night?
With that. I think that Christine might have told George to call me, but I'll tell you, I had been in New York a few years, and I was working some. I was done a few records, a few jingles. I was getting by, but I really wasn't doing real well, and I was walking one day. There's a nice place to walk. I was walking, and I was out and about, and I just kind of said to myself, boy, it might be time to get real here. Not really making much of a living, not getting by. I had dropped out of college years before, and I thought, well, it might be time to just go back to school and get real and get a job. And I went home that day, like within an hour of I was having those thoughts. I went home, and I had a message machine back in the day. Young people don't even know what that is, but you had to go back home to check your machine. And I went home, and there was a message from George. He always called me boss when I was in the band.
That's funny. I had Christine Allman on my podcast before, and she actually mentioned that nickname too.
Yeah. Because I was not the leader of the band, but I was the guy who like dealt with the club owners. I was the guy who collected the money at the end. So they called me boss. Anyway, so he's on the machine. Hey, boss, call me, all right? So I called him up, and he says, listen, we've got a couple gigs with the SNL band, and one of them's in this bar out at the end of Long Island, and one of them's at Lorne Michaels' house, and they're going to pay real good, and if they go okay, you'll do the show, all right? And my okay, because it was not like an audition line up to get the best gig in town. It was like, for once I knew the right guy at the right time. So I'd been working some. I was certainly qualified to do the gig, but there were plenty of people I was just very lucky. That's how I got that gig.
How long did you stay with the Saturday Night Live?
4 years.
4 years. And I know one of the great things that came out of that tenure is you guys did a live record with Buddy Guy. That's still, to me, one of the best Buddy Guy records out there, because
I think it's cool.
And that was GE and you and the Saturday Night Live band. Was that recorded in the studio, or did you go somewhere?
No, it was 2 gigs at Irving Plaza in New York, which was at the time it was like a big, a small theater or a big nightclub, depending how you want to look at it. And then two gigs also at Buddy's place.
In Chicago?
Yeah, it's called
Legends.
So yeah, we played there 2 nights and previously 2 nights, and they just, I think most of it was from the last night in Chicago, but I think that I don't really know. I think that they were called from all the shows.
Yeah. So during your time in the Saturday Night Live band, are there any particular memories or maybe musical guests you guys backed up that stick out in your memory?
No. If you asked me about a particular thing or a particular person, I might have an anecdote that I would think of, but I don't have like, tell me some stories about SNL. And people have asked me that all the time. I don't really have anything like that, I just don't, about SNL. I wasn't really close friends with anybody in the cast. I was friendly with all of them. It's one day a week really, and you're everybody there on that day is working. They're busy. Even if they're walking down the hall, they're busy. They're in their own space. So we didn't really get to hang. It was. Maybe those guys did with each other during the week. I don't know, but it was sometimes 2 days, mostly 1 day a week, of playing music.
Yeah, but you ended up on an Adam Sandler record.
Yes, right, and Adam is the person that I got to be quote unquote friendliest with. We're not pals. For a minute we were pals on the show there, but not really close with him. But yes, he was doing a comedy album at the time, and GE was involved with him, and I got involved that way.
Yeah, and the Saturday Night Live band also did a record on their own during that time.
Yep. That was really a G.E. Smith album, but I think I don't know how it was. I think it was a G.E. Smith band, or it was this SNL band though.
Yeah, I think Leon might have been on it.
But he was in the SNL band. So
during that time and a little bit later, you got to play live with some of my favorite artists. You got to play with Odetta, Phoebe Snow, Hubert Sumlin. How are some of these, musical legends, if you will, to work with? Do you have?
Well, I'll go in order. Let's see. Odetta was a really nice lady, but she was older. It was like working for me. It was like working with grandma, But she was really sweet. And she said to me, "Oh yes, this is Paul. He's going to play the bass. Oh, the bass. It's like my magic carpet. you know, that's what she expected me to be, her magic carpet. And, you know, it was that kind of thing, you know. She was really, really nice, really warm. Again, I didn't get to be pals with her, you know. She didn't call me to go have coffee after the session, you know. But on the session, she was really nice, a nice lady. And like Phoebe was someone that I just knew from around town, and she called me to play one day, and I did that for I don't know, for a couple of months, you know. But she didn't really work a lot. But she was a lot of fun. She was, you know, to use the word, I'll say it, crazy. She was crazy in a really sweet way. I guess a lot of famous people are that. You know, it's crazy to me or you, but, you know, she's not really crazy in her world. And she was eccentric, I guess is a better way to put it. She was really a lot of fun, and she was so sweet and smart. She knew a lot about a lot of things, and with the audience, she was really clever and smart. She became somebody. She was one of the first people that I saw, and there have been a lot of people that they step on a stage, and poof, they become somebody else. They become that person. You know, she became Phoebe Snow. She wasn't Phoebe, the person I knew in the car on the way to the gig. She was, you know, that, and it was really interesting to see. But she was sparkling and really, really charming on stage. Not that she wasn't, but in a different way. You know, so several folks, as you ask about them, I'll tell you the ones that just turned into somebody different as soon as they hit the stage.
Yeah. Did you work with her around the same time you worked with Bo Diddley?
Yeah, there was a time, it was like after I stopped doing the SNL, but I was still in New York, and you know, there was a period there that I was just like, I was still a freelance musician, and I was, I say it all the time, playing with anybody that lets me, and that's when I, you know, again, subbing for somebody with Bo, and that's again another thing that I got to do quite a bit over a couple of years. Bo was a really sweet guy. Again, not, you know, like, you know, you'd hang with the band people and go to the gigs, and like he didn't show up to sound check. You know, I saw him during the gig. He was really sweet and friendly, and we had a couple of chats about Cadillacs. He lived in Florida, and he liked to. He got old Cadillacs, old like in the 60s and 70s, and rebuilt them. That's kind of what he does. I never saw one of his cars. Saw a couple of pictures, but we talked about that. But, you know, like, again, he wasn't somebody that I had over in my house for coffee. He was just a, you know, I was working for him, and he was another really, really great guy.
Yeah, so he is so much known for having a very rhythmic sound.
Yeah.
And for a bass player, that must be a pretty cool gig, because you can really dig in there and be part of that.
Yeah, but you know, an interesting thing about that, you know, they say the Bo Diddley beat. He's the only guy that has a beat named after him. So it's dum 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 dum. That's what people generally think of as the Bo Diddley beat. They didn't really want me to play that. And like, if you listen to the song Hey Bo Diddley, he kind of plays around that. It's kind of warped or morphed into that dun 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 thing that people play. So let's do a Bo Diddley thing, and that's what they play. But that isn't really the beat on the Bo Diddley record. He implies that and plays around it. So when I got that the first time on that gig, they opened the show playing that beat, dun 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 dun, because that's what most people, what white people know him as, is playing that beat. But then Margot, the MD, said, "Don't play that all the time. Play around it." And she's turned me on to that. That it wasn't just that beat. I mean, I kind of knew it before I went in, but I was surprised that I'm not surprised that they knew it, but I'm surprised that they were they wanted to keep it that way and not make it the way that it had morphed into.
Yeah.
That was a cool thing about that gig, playing with Bo and learning to play around that groove, but still making it feel like that, but not be that.
Yeah. So you mentioned David Johansen before,
Mm-hmm.
who Buster Poindexter. Before that was a member of New York Dolls.
Mm-hmm.
Was he your entry into getting to work with Hubert Sumlin? Because I know
No.
he did some work with Hubert too.
No. That was with GE. He got some gigs, play like they were as a duet. Like at first it was like G.E. Smith with Hubert, and then so we did a few of those, and then it was Hubert featuring the G.E. Smith band, and it was both. He was a really interesting guy, nice guy, black man with blue eyes, which I had never seen before. I'd seen green eyes, but he was really just a nice guy. He had some stories that I couldn't conjure for you now or make them sound as interesting as he made them, but he was a lot of fun to be with. He was another one of those people that fun to have him in the room, Hubert was just and what a guitar player. Not like Buddy Guy, like not a fiery guy like that, but he had a thing, that you'd have to go and listen to some Alan Wolf records and check it out, because I couldn't describe how he played, but he was special and unique.
Yeah, I got the chance to see him live when I was still living in Switzerland. He would come up, and that was really special for sure. Around the same time, I believe, you played on a really great record that I love, and that's Peter Wolf's Sleepless album.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember anything about how that job came about?
I remember. Yes. Kenny White was the producer, and it was in the summer. It was the summer before 9/11 happened. It was in July, and Kenny called. He said, "Listen, we got a session tomorrow. Can you make it?" Well, I think so. Well, it's with Wolf, Peter Wolf, and Keith's coming to play. Keith, yeah, Keith Richards. He's going to play, and I guess I can tell this story now. He said, Peter's calling in some favors. he got Mick Jagger to sing on a song, and I think it was Steve Earle that sang a duet, and Keith was going to play on a song, so he said, so anyway, tomorrow at 6:00, he told me where to be, so I went there. I was, I showed up at 5:30 with my bass, so Sean Pelton was going to play on it. Sean was setting up. I go in there and set up, and he said, "Well, Keith's going to be here at 7." And his amp was setting there before, and he walked in at 1 minute before 7, very professional, and so he was just really friendly, really smart, and really nice, so I got to play on that song, and it was a 12-bar blues, but it went really nice. It was a lot of fun. Keith was standing in front of me as close as you are now, which is less than 10 feet away. It was the greatest. He was playing, and I was playing the upright, and the other people were on the other side of the room. It was really cool. So we hung for a day or an evening, and there was some drinking, but he never got any different than when he showed up. He was totally in control of it wasn't like he knows how he's perceived. Keith does, and he understands that and plays on it. But he was all there when I was with him anyway. It's really funny if you listen to what he said, and you had to get up close to his accent and stuff. You have to understand exactly what he said. But when you figure out what he said, it's really funny and really smart and really interesting. And but he was bigger than life, but he was just there. He was like that. I didn't walk onto a stage with him, so I don't know. Maybe when he got in the car to go home, he wasn't that like that anymore. But he was really great to be around, and that's how I got to be on that record. It came out good, I think.
It sure did.
Yeah.
And that brings us up to you staying in Levon Helm's band.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about?
Same way as the other ones. Jimmy Vivino called me one day. He just said, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Well, I'm sitting here. I'm playing my doghouse." He said, "Good, because I've got a gig next week with Levon if you want to do it." There are 2 gigs, actually. So, yeah, sure. I didn't have to think about it too much. And I actually had another gig, and I really wanted to do this thing, so I kind of burned the bridge, which sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes if there's a gig that you, as a freelance guy, you just have to say, "I'm sorry, I can't make it to that gig because I'm doing this." And usually people understand, but the bridge is burned because they won't call you again. But I don't regret that. But yeah, so Jimmy called me and said, "You and I can get together maybe next week and run over a few things." So there was no official rehearsal even. And we're like, well, we might do this tune, we might do that. They were all bluesy kind of songs, and a few that had a few changes that he showed me. But that was totally a feel thing, and the first gig I played, and Levon and I just clicked, and I didn't know what to expect, but he it clicked, we clicked, and after the gig, he I didn't have to ask. he knew that he already had my number. He said, here's my number. If you need anything, call me. So that nobody ever did that. Nobody famous that I worked for ever did that. And it made me feel great. He was such a gentleman, and he was as cool as you wanted him to be, as you thought, as you would think Levon Helm would be. He was incredible. And I have a story about that.
All right.
The first time I went on the road with him, there were 2 gigs in Arkansas, and most of the band was flying there, but there was a bus going. Levon didn't care about flying, so there was a bus going, and like I said, most of the band flew, but I was looking forward to riding on the bus with Lee, and so anyhow, the bus broke down, like in West Virginia somewhere, in the middle of the night. So we had to, like at 4 or 5 o'clock, we pulled into this truck stop, and we just had to wait for the mechanic to show up at 8 or 9, whenever he showed up, so he could fix the bus. And so we're just laying out on the bus, and Lee comes over and said, "Paulie, let's go. I'll get you some breakfast." Oh, okay, sure. So we went in this truck stop place in like, it was somewhere in West Virginia, with really rural place. And so we're sitting down to breakfast, and Levon really looked like Mr. Everyman. He was dressed like, he was, if you didn't know who he was, you wouldn't think he was a famous musician and movie star. But he was. And he was just there. He was cutting up with the waitresses, and they just thought, "Oh, what a nice old man. What a cool old man." And I loved that they didn't know who he was. But he didn't act like a famous person that was like too cool to be hanging with them. He was one of them. He was one of us. He was a human, and it was really great. And I loved seeing that. I loved that part of him. If he was here right now, he'd make you feel like you were brothers. He just did. Geez, I tear up when I think of him.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I never really got to meet him. I got to see him perform a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even not knowing him, I feel I got this deep connection just through his music and just the way he presented himself on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no surprise to me why he become such an iconic person in American music, because it's his playing, his singing, but it's this whole aura, this whole thing that you have.
Yeah.
You told me a story once that I love, and I try not to give too much away, but I would love for you to recall it. And you were on stage once, and the band is about to play a song you don't really know.
Oh, yeah.
I love that story. Would you mind telling that?
No. So we're playing. It was. It makes no difference. That got.
Yeah.
Somebody. Levon must have called it. They said, "Hey, let's play this," and there was I hadn't played it before. There was a chart somewhere, and I had a pile of charts, but it wasn't organized or anything, because most of the songs, there very rarely was called for a chart. But anyhow, let me get the chart for that. Let me find it, and I couldn't find it at that moment. They're about to say 1, 2, 3, 4. I couldn't find the thing, and I didn't know this song very well. So, it starts, and it's not really a simple 1, 4, 5 tune. It's not a complicated song.
But it has quite a few sections.
Yes, a few different sections, and there are a couple different bridges, and it anyway, So we're playing it, and I, played a verse and a chorus, and I made a couple little flubs, like whoop, up, get to the right note. Wasn't a train wreck, but it wasn't great. And then Levon, at some point, he's playing the drums, standing next to him, and he says, I couldn't hear him, but he said, "Watch me," and so I read his lips, "Watch me," and okay, because I was behind Jimmy Vivino, who was on the guitar. That's who I would like to be watching, but I couldn't see him. And Levon, after that, I just watched him, and through watching his body and where he made accents and the way that he played the song with his body, I never made a mistake. And I've told you, I feel like he had some kind of mojo, some kind of thing that he put on me for that song, that I didn't make any more mistakes. I just knew the right thing to play, and I played it. That's the story.
Yeah. And although Rick Danko mainly played an electric bass in the band, he wanted his bass player in the Levon Helm band to play an upright bass.
I read in his Lee's first book, This Wheel's on Fire. I remember reading in that that he didn't like electric bass, and he said something like, "Well, when the Fender bass came in, it changed everything in music, because the bass it just was a different kind of sound, so it made everything louder, and you lost the earthy sound of it. The way that the drums interacted with the bass was different, because the bass was just different. And if you know about an upright bass and drums now, if they're not amplified, the bass is like the sound, and the drum is punches up in frequencies above that, and somehow modern music has mostly changed from
Almost
that.
flipped it around.
Yeah, flipped it around. So anyway, Levon liked the old way, and so yes, in his band he wanted to have a upright bass.
So him as a drummer and you as building the rhythm section with him, how was he to play with? What is there a special dynamic, or how did you just feel doing that gig? How
Well,
did that feel?
like the first time, it was like I said, no rehearsal, just get on this. I ran a couple of things with Jimmy a couple of days before the gig, so I had an idea about a couple of songs we would play, but it was just like, okay, set up the bass, and there was a guy who set up the drums, and Lee just came out, met him, hey, how you doing? Came out and started playing, and we just fell into it. And yeah, you just like, he's obviously the focal point, so my job was to try and play in a way and be a way that he was just comfortable in doing what he did. And after a little while, you feel like there are subtleties in the rhythms that you just feel naturally, and he had such a natural feel, and it wasn't he was rock solid, but it wasn't like metronomic like some people. And that's a good way to play too, but he just swung, and so I learned so much playing with him the first time, and then I learned from the first time. I realized, pay attention and keep your hat on, because every time I played with him, it was just such an experience playing. Like, it was different than anybody else that I had played with. And luckily, he liked me too, because that's why I was there more than once. So yeah, he was easy to play with, because it just felt so great, always. He never really said anything to me about play this way or play that way. No, never anything. Just do what you do. And that again, people that, like you get to a level and, you're supposed to do what you do. Very rarely do you get to a gig where they want particular things from you. Sure, if it's like a Broadway or reading gig, you play what's on the paper and do that. But as an interpretive playing like we do, nobody ever says, do it like this. GE used to say to drummers, we had a different drummer, he kind of, well, gee, what should I do? What should I do? Just play great, he would say. Just play great. Don't think about anything. And that's what he wanted. Just be yourself and be the best you can be, and that would be good.
Yeah. And a lot of those gigs were at Levon's barn, but then also there were some road trips. You mentioned the one where the bus broke down, but one of those road trips took you guys down to Nashville, and you guys performed at the Ryman. That was recorded for a PBS special and a live record called Ramble At The Ryman, which was the last album that came out before he passed, and which won a Grammy. And you were on that record. Do you remember anything about that particular?
That particular thing, well, that was actually the second time that we played at the Ryman. And I didn't know that they were going to DVD it until I got to the gig. I guess everybody else knew, but anyway, it was just another gig, but I mean, at the Ryman, it was like a big deal to us. But I remember thinking like, between the people in the band and myself, there were like probably 20,000 gigs had been played, between all the people in the band. And I thought, wow, well, of those gigs, that's the best one for me. It was really a great night. But we just did what we did, and a few stars were there, and it was wonderful. And I just feel really lucky to have been there. Feel lucky to have been in the barn playing with Lee.
You also got to record with Levon in the studio a few times on an Arlen Roth project, on the Christine Allman project. How was he in the studio? Was that the same, or was that different?
He was the same. He was just a really sweet man. When he sat down at the drums, he played great. One thing that I might have told you, we were doing this recording for a guy, and there was a guy who was the quote-unquote producer. He was really the guy that had the money, the money guy. So we played this song. It was a 12-bar blues, and went in to listen to it. And the guy says, "Well, that was good, but first time we played it, Levon played what he, like himself. He played that kind of Levon band thing. He played it, and what I just imitated wasn't it. But anyway, so the guy says, "Well, yeah, that was good, but what I kind of had in mind was dun 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 dun." He, kind of imitated that kind of sound. And Lee was so sweet and so, "Oh yeah, I get it, absolutely." And he was, like I said, the nicest guy in the world. He just charmed everyone there. he was real. It wasn't like charming him by make believe. He was just who he was. I understand you. Absolutely. This is great. Yeah, let's do it right now. I'll get it. So we go back in the studio. He plays exactly the same. And the guy loved it. Now, maybe the guy just said he loved it. Maybe the guy didn't know the difference. But anyhow, we went out, and after I know because I was playing with him, he played pretty much exactly the same. Didn't change anything. But the guy loved it. And that's the thing, studio guys will tell, stories of like, the producer a lot of times doesn't know what he's asking for. Play it a little more green or whatever. You're not talking about you. They'll ask for sometimes things, and there's always stories about, well, I did this, or I touched this dial that didn't do anything, and then the guy liked it, whatever. This particular thing, that's what he did, and it was great because I realized that he didn't do anything other than be nice to the guy.
Yeah, I think as a producer, the most talent you need to have is cast your project, right?
Yeah.
Call the right guys, know what these guys can contribute to the project, and then your job is easy.
Yeah.
That's how my way of producing is, if I hire you, I know what you bring. If I hire Lynn Williams, I know what he brings to the session. And then
absolutely,
the job for me is easy because you're going to produce your own parts the way they need to fall. So
yeah, well, this guy had hired Levon Helm, but he wanted him to not be Levon Helm, and he so, but that's a whole other story, and I'm not giving any names about that.
So 2 years ago, we went down to Muscle Shoals and did a 40th anniversary celebration of The Last Waltz. And I asked you to be in the band for it, which was, no-brainer for me due to your connection with Levon. We had Bones Malone lead the horn section, who was in the horn section of The Last Waltz, and I tried to cast the band in order to being able to getting as close to replicating their sound as possible. And obviously the hardest part, the biggest shoes to fill in a way, I think, is Levon's, because he had such a unique and identifiable way to play. And I asked Lynn Williams to play drums on that show because I knew he was, for everybody I know, probably the closest kin and could really, do a good job doing that. Out of your perspective, how was that show for you? First of all, you going back to that songbook that you played with Levon a long time, but then at the same time, obviously not having Levon next to you. Was that a bittersweet thing or just like a joyful thing to be able to revisit? How did you perceive that project?
Well, I really liked it a lot. I loved the music. I didn't really think about Levon too much that night. We were just playing music, and that's how we played the music with Levon. Didn't really think about anything else. So I was pretty much I was just in the moment, playing with Lynn, playing with you, playing with the people that were there. We were playing band music, but I was just playing music with my friends,
So obviously you had a lot of great drummers to work with. Your career starting with Mickey Curry, Sean Pelton, Levon, obviously. And I love that rhythm section with you and Lynn. To me, that's like, the Funky Chester rhythm section.
Me too.
Or whatever we call it.
Me too.
What makes the two of you work well? what do you think that might be from your perspective?
I don't know. It's interesting that so much of the music is the spaces between the notes. You know, they're as big or bigger as the notes that you do play, and we just feel the spaces in a similar way. Now, Lynn is so great at feeling the spaces with anyone. He makes everybody sound good, you know. So I don't feel like what we have is unique, because I feel like Lynn does that with everybody, and I like to think that I can do that with a lot of people. Like, you know, as you become a little more accomplished, you learn to do that. You learn to just sense what the other guy's going to do, what will make them sound good, what will make you sound good, what will make you sound good together. And it's just a feel thing. And we feel a lot of this stuff similarly. Yeah. Or, you know, in every moment, like I said, tomorrow you could put him with a different bass player, or 10 different bass players, and he'll make everybody sound good. You know, that's what he does.
Yeah. So I think about 8 years ago, you moved to Nashville after being based in New York for a long time. Yeah. What made you move here?
Well, the music work was slowing down in New York. There was just less and less work, and less for me. So I just felt like it was time for a change. Truthfully, at the time, my marriage had broken down, had fallen apart, and I had wanted to move to Nashville like 20 years ago. And my wife, at the time, said, "No way, we're not moving down south. Forget it." And at the time, I was so in love, and just forget it, baby. Just forget about it. Don't even think about it. Sorry I mentioned it. And it was real, like, okay, you don't want to do it. I've thought about it, but if you don't, okay, fine. But then when that relationship fell apart, all of a sudden I realized, well, I could do now what I didn't do 10 years earlier. And so in doing that, it also put a period at the end of that relationship for me, which was, for me, it was at a really good time. And also, I had met a few people when the 2 times we played at the Ryman, which was except for one other time, that was the only time I had been in Nashville. I had made a few friends, and I really liked the vibe here. Although, like I said, I didn't get around at all. I was just playing the gig and meeting the people that were around. But I liked it here. So I just wanted to move, and I did.
Yeah, and you got to record and perform with a lot of people down here, including amazing rhythm aces, Albert McClinton, Joan L. Monster and the Taj Mahalics, which is a cool band. You guys have down here with Tom Britt, and well, thank God you did, because that's how we met.
Yep.
And we've had the chance to working together in the studio and sometime live, and I'm sure there's going to be much more of that coming.
Yeah.
I actually know there is.
So
I look forward
there
to
is.
that. And I would certainly like to thank you for spending this past hour with me here talking about your career.
Is it an hour already? I guess so.
It absolutely is. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess. Yeah. And hopefully it was not too much work having to recall all that. I sure appreciate that.
No, I loved it. So much stuff. You asked a question that I hadn't really thought about, and so thank you for that.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome, and I just wish you the best of luck for everything that'll come.
Okay.
This was the 42nd episode of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. Thanks for tuning in today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to check out some of our earlier episodes and subscribe to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour podcast on iTunes or look it up on YouTube, TuneIn, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. That's it for today. See you next week.